Hey, this is Nick Raboy, and I'm with my co-host Mike Lynn. The topic of today's episode is no-code and low-code application development. So we're going to be talking to Marius and Ole, the co-founders of AppFarm, and we're going to see how they're using MongoDB to accomplish just that.
The only constant in software is change.
Software, data, and all things MongoDB. Welcome to the MongoDB podcast with your hosts, Michael Lynn and Nick Raboy. Ole and Marius, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on the show. How are you today?
We're pretty good here in Oslo, Norway.
Terrific. Yep. So we're quite a few miles apart. What's the weather like where you are?
I would say it's an early spring in Oslo. Sunny, I guess low 70s in Fahrenheit. So pretty good for a Nordic May.
Nice. That's great. So I was really excited to have you on the podcast. I've worked in a similar realm that you're working in, the no code. Actually, I worked in a low code environment in the past. I worked on a system called System Builder, and this is back in the dark days before the internet. It was on a system that worked on the PIC operating system. You'll probably not remember that, and very few people listening will even know what the PIC operating system is. But that was the first experience I had with low code, no code, and the benefits were really powerful. You know, I was in this role where I was doing development, and there was a lot of monotonous setup work that I needed to do in order for me to start creating an application. And there was just all this filler code that needed to be at the beginning, and functions that I was just copying from one system to the next, and it just seemed like a lot of wasted effort. And along came System Builder, and it enabled me to be very agile, very fast with creating these very complete user-driven applications. So forms, any kind of form that would be created could be created just in a flash. And so I was really excited when we started talking about having you on the show. And tell me a little bit about AppFarm, what it is, and how you came to create AppFarm.
Sure. AppFarm was established a few years back, 2017, here in Oslo, Norway. And actually, I think from your intro that our objective is not that different from what you experienced probably 15, 20 years ago. It's just that the world and what's possible with software has dramatically changed since you worked with it. So our ambition and our original plan was to bring to market a true no-code application development platform, but delivered as a service in the cloud. So our ambition, and it still is to simplify software development in a way that enables a whole new class of developers, not the traditional kind, that maybe have some experience with software engineering, but not like a lot, or it's not their primary career maybe, but enable them to create fully functioning enterprise applications much faster and easier than it's possible just a few years back. So that's sort of the overall agenda we're working on.
So is it the premise that someone could become proficient using a product like AppFarm and totally avoid having to come up to speed on development, the traditional development paradigm where I learn a language, I learn a database, that type of paradigm?
So I think what we do, and we can go into a little bit more details later, is to create a way to make software more visually, but we do not remove the core fundamentals of software. So you still need to have a sort of fundamental understanding of how software is created in a more, let's say, theoretical sense, but you do not need to go through the usual routine of learning a particular language and the syntax and all that surrounding a software development subject in order to create software using this application or other no-code platform. So it's more of a tool than it is to replace the theory of software, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think I get it. Now, you make a distinction between no code and low code. and AppFarm is a no-code solution. Am I correct?
Yeah. So I think it makes sense to sort of take a look at this whole terminology no code, because it's really being used on a lot of different places right now, in a lot of different contexts. So in the most sort of broadest sense, it's used now to describe a lot of SaaS tools that let the user do stuff with software that you in the past needed to write code to do, right? So, but this sort of emergence of these tools that label themselves no code, most of them are like great tools, but they are generally more specialized to do specific tasks, and they have obvious limitations in what you can do in terms of creating custom applications. So create applications that can do a broad area of different functionality. So there are obviously a lot of developer tools also that call themselves no code, and we use a lot of these tools both as users and developers. But what we focus on and what we sort of distinguish ourselves in that market is to deliver a no code platform. And in that context, you're definitely right that this low code platforms has been around at least 15 years. And there's big players in that area, OutSystems, Mendix, Appian, which are delivering low code platforms. And so the real discussion here in this context, I think, is what's the difference between a no code platform and a low code platform? And the way we look at this is that in a low code platform, the target user are developers, really, like traditional developers, and it's a way to make software programming more efficient. But in a no code platform, and AppFarm in particular, is a way to create platform without any use of code. Like there's no manual coding written anywhere in our platform, or you can if you want in some circumstances, but really the core value proposition is to create software without any use of code. And the target developers are perhaps users that don't think of themselves or identify themselves really as a software developer.
Who are those developers? I'm sure you've got a bunch of customers. Who are? Can you talk a little bit about who this ends up being, and who's successfully creating applications with AppFarm today?
It's a good question. They're sort of a mixed bunch of different personalities and backgrounds, but I think some of them have programmed before, like earlier. They have some software experience. Some of them are designers that have sort of a front end background, or have looked at web applications before, but not proficient as a full stack developers. Some are business people that have a sort of perhaps an engineering degree, so they have programmed during college days, but haven't sort of looked at programming after that. So they're obviously technical savvy, but they don't work as software developers today. That said, we also have people that are sort of software developers in some way or another, working in part of the stack, typically more front end, but use AppFarm as a way to be a full stack developer truly. So that's sort of I guess there are different categories of users of AppFarm or no code platforms in general, I think, but they're definitely not the full stack developer as an occupation.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's changing the economics of the development space. So I can imagine that larger enterprises they're going to be interested in this, because it's going to remove that requirement to have a huge on-staff team of deeply technical developers, right? Who ends up being the customers that you're selling into?
So when we offer a platform, we really have two main groups of customers. First of all, we sell to sort of consultancy firms that use AppFarm as a way to create solutions for their end customers. And we also sell the platform to the end customers themselves, which is like big, not necessarily huge corporations, but from medium-sized firms to large corporates that use AppFarm in actually the way you described it. So there's a small team of IT savvy people. They come from business to the business side, but also from the IT side, which use AppFarm to create applications internally.
So, what about competitors? Who do you see as your primary competitors?
So if you go back a little bit to these low code platforms, they obviously have worked a number of years to create great products. But as I said, their primary target, as we sort of understand it, is the developers in really big corporates to sort of replace the whole internal application development program. Um, and they also work primarily with, or not primarily, but they support on-premise infrastructure. And AppFarm and other no-code platforms that we like to consider ourselves competitors to, we work typically only in the cloud. So there's this quite big difference between the stack that we use to deliver our service compared to perhaps what the low-code platforms are using. And since we are a cloud-native firm and can utilize a lot of the standardizations on software libraries and frameworks, we can offer a service at a considerably lower cost than what these guys are doing, because they have a totally different problem they're working on, if you know what I mean. So in the more what we consider competitors, there are actually only a handful that do exactly what we do. There's a Dutch firm called BettyBlocks, which has a similar no-code platform, and in the US there's also a pretty young firm called Uncork, which I believe also uses MongoDB technology as we do, that work on a similar platform. Um, but it's actually a pretty complicated question, because what is a competitor? Well, there's an alternative to your solution, and we also compete with primarily traditional programming, like traditional way to create software is our primary competitor. That's what we meet in the market every day. We do not meet BettyBlocks or Uncork in the Nordics, to put it like that. So our main competitor is the traditional way of doing things, which is the typical, I guess, scenario when you're doing innovative things.
Hmm. And speaking of MongoDB, you mentioned that one of your competitors is using MongoDB. How is maybe I'd like to get a little bit more technical about the stack, about AppFarm. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what the stack looks like and how you're leveraging MongoDB as a part of that stack.
So for no-code technologies, there are generally two ways of running the end application. The one is code generation, where the platform will actually generate code that can be executed. The other way is to use an interpretive technology, which is what AppFarm is. This means that the runtime code is the same for all applications, but it uses an application description to define how application will work, look, and feel, kind of like how Excel works. So you have only one runtime. So one of the big advantages with this approach is that the end applications can be changed at runtime, which drastically speeds up development cycle. So you can just tweak small stuff and you'll see the change live. As for AppFarm, the entire platform is written in JavaScript and TypeScript, both front end and the back end, and also all the support systems in the platform. For front end, we're using React and Material UI. Back end consists of several microservices running Node.js. For hosting and running the platform, we use Google Cloud for now and Kubernetes, and we actually don't manage a single server ourselves. We only use immutable infrastructure and hosted services like MongoDB Atlas.
So you are using Atlas. So all of the, and let me get this straight. So you mentioned it's interpretive. What does the interface look like for someone who's creating an application with AppFarm?
So the development tool that we call AppFarm Create is a full stack tool which is accessed through any web browser. So a developer or a user, or what we call a modeler, really, they do everything they need to create, deploy, and manage their web applications in that browser-based tool. So in that way, the tool itself is also multi-developer support in real time, as you would expect from any SaaS service as AppFarm is. So that's also a somewhat different approach to what the low-code players are doing, which is installed software on Windows machines typically. So in the tool itself, it's a VCVig editor where you create user interface based on AppFarm components. And as Ole mentioned, we use material design as a design framework behind our UI components. And really, you drag and drop UI components from either lower level components like containers to more complex and work together components like charting components and stuff like that. And you create user interface by ordering these components in sort of a hierarchy, but you see it visually. And you can also look in the development environment on the client side exactly what you're doing real time. So that's sort of how you create UI. And then you also have the flexibility with a full visual CSS editor to sort of define the behavior of the UI in any way you want.
Now, is MongoDB underlying the entire structure? So when I'm modeling an application in AppFarm, is that creating a document per se that's getting stored in MongoDB?
Yes. So you use MongoDB for two things. First of all, we use it for customer data, of course, but we also use it to store the application description, as you said.
So you're storing customer data. It's obviously going to be possibly sensitive data. How are you treating that from a security perspective? Are you using any advanced security features?
Yes. So we are separating all customer data, of course. So all customers have, or all our solutions, that we call them, have separate databases.
Okay, so a customer per database.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm getting a good understanding of the stack here. And you mentioned microservices with Kubernetes, Google Cloud. So is AppFarm available for on-prem? Let's say I'm a customer of yours and I have a different set of requirements for one particular application. Do you offer it as an on-prem solution as well?
So the shortest answer is that we do not. But the longer answer is that we have basically all our customer solutions that we have created using the platform or our partners have created for end users. They are integrated in some way with some legacy system that the customer have. So when we started AppFarm, all of us have our background is in enterprise software. So we know that when you want to do new digital innovation and create new digital infrastructure in a big corporate, you're not going to throw out everything you have. It's just not the realistic scenario. So what you need to do is to create new and modern cloud-based software, but you have to interact some way with what's there already. So we have created technologies and solutions in AppFarm that enable us to integrate with whatever's out there. And that's the way we sort of avoid and really advise our customers to not use on-prem solutions for this purpose, because what we do is to extend and expand what they have already, and they can sort of migrate that to the cloud in their own pace, but they don't need to wait to create those amazing digital experiences that the modern user expects.
So tell me a little bit more about how you're leveraging Atlas and what's your experience been like? Did you start with MongoDB on premise at any point and then transition, or have you always used a database as a service?
A fully hosted database as Atlas was a no-brainer for us. We could then leverage the expertise that you guys have to handle the database operations, and we can focus on what we do best. So not doing everything ourselves enables us to move very fast.
Yeah, I understand. So we were chatting previously, and I understand you release quite frequently. What does the AppFarm release cycle look like?
Ole, do you want to sort of comment on how many releases we have in a week?
Depends, but once a week to once a day, depending on.
I guess the answer here is that there's a big benefit of being small, like because we can move extremely fast and we can release new functionality because we know all our customers. Obviously, this is not going to be the case in maybe 12 months or 18 months, because we're going to be significantly bigger, hopefully. And at some point, you need to do your release cycles more, planned and orderly. But at the moment, this is a huge benefit for us, because when a client asks for something, we can create it, and the next day we can release it. So we really want to sort of maintain that sort of culture as long as we can, and we're very transparent and open to our external developers that we are going to ship fast, and you're going to test, and you're going to give feedback, and then obviously we're going to improve. But this is actually, because of the whole logistics of AppFarm, pretty safe, because when we apply and you release it, it obviously doesn't apply to all production environments in the end customer solutions immediately. They're sort of taken when it's due, if you know what I mean. So new functionality is released to developers and the development environments first, and then taken to the production environment in due course.
Well, that's really powerful. Yeah, and I can see how that could be really, really attractive to be able to support a faster pace of updates. So speaking of releases and roadmaps, I'm interested in what's coming down the pike. What are the big features that you're looking to implement as a part of your upcoming releases?
Well, we're mainly customer driven, so in particular, I don't know, but in the big picture, we will provide more building blocks and more smart feature that enables our users to further speed up the application development. Like, we can use Atlas to get professionals to take care of our data. We want our customers to be able to leverage our expertise when it comes to creating and managing their applications. So, speed.
Terrific.
In other words, like we have a sort of complete library of components already, which enable you to create any custom application, really. But our job as a firm is to give developers more complex, fully ready to go components that can do more stuff in one go. And that's sort of the way we're going to always, I think, be creating more functionality. Is that AppFarm platform is obviously never completed, and I don't know what we're going to do in a year, but it's going to be around that theme.
So we first started talking because AppFarm is a part of the MongoDB for Startups program, and we talked with a lot of startups that are considering programs like the MongoDB for Startups program. I'm wondering if you could share your experience. What was really helpful as a part of the program? What did you take advantage of? And maybe if you've got any advice for folks considering a program like MongoDB for Startups.
Sure. I think the main attractor for us initially was that we sort of get a access directly to internal expertise. If there's anything we need, the door was open directly to the people that know the answers. So although we haven't used it as much as we perhaps could, then that's a big security for us as a startup, to be able to interact with a pretty big corporations like MongoDB is, from this tiny outskirt of the Nordic market, building a new company. So that's a key point. And the second, as a startup, you never say no to credits, right? From one of your most important technology providers. So that's obviously very generous and important contribution to us, particularly in the most early stages when we were building a company. And um, taking it from sort of the business perspective, it's incredibly cool to be able to be on this podcast and be able to be sort of showcased by MongoDB people in other channels, which we have limited ability to access, obviously. So it generally provides a sense of credibility to what you're doing when you're taken into a program, and I guess, and I think that you don't let everybody in, right? So it gives you support, which is much needed in the beginning.
So, any lessons or recommendations for other startups in the space? Doesn't even have to be about the MongoDB for Startups program, but things that you've learned starting up AppFarm and as you continue to grow.
Yeah, sure. There, as startups lessons, that's, you can have a lot of podcasts on that, but
Right.
I think in this context, I really want to sort of focus on one thing, which is now a cultural foundation of what we're doing every day, and a very key factor to how the platform has become what it is today. And that in the early stages when you're building something, you really should avoid trying to perfect everything. And people don't realize the huge opportunity they have with software, because you can actually release something that's not completely finished, but you can do it very quickly. So what we did is we offered the platform and services on the platform extremely early, uh, because your product needs to be scrutinized. It needs to be commented on and used, and the people that has to be doing that are the early adopters. So you just need to ship it, get feedback, and make the improvements as you go along. And I'm not sure if we would even recognize AppFarm Create, the development tool, in like a couple of years ago, but that was used to develop our first customer application, and which is still running today. So um, over time, you develop new stuff, other stuff become important, you expand, you take away. You need to be very close to what the market is doing, and engineers, at least European engineers, I think, have a big they have a big desire to create the perfect solution, and you need to try to avoid that feeling because it doesn't exist. So you need to get your stuff out there, and that's the only way to move forward, sort of. So that's my big advice for other startups, and particularly in software, you have the ability to do that. If you're doing hardware stuff, it's much more difficult, right? So that's at least one lesson that we have sort of incorporated in everything we do.
Yeah, and Elliot Horowitz, our co-founder and CTO, talks about that all the time, and he's a huge proponent of MVP. And the sad fact is that startups in the startup world, I think it's something like 80% of all startups end up failing. And I've been doing some research for a talk. 42% of them that fail because they don't know enough about the market. They've failed to determine whether or not their product hits a big enough market. And by releasing early, you can get that super valuable feedback. So it's interesting that that's your recommendation, and I think it's a really solid piece of advice for startups. So release early, get feedback, pivot, change your product to meet the market demands. That's great advice. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I think in the to follow up on your comment there, that this also applies to software in the context of the customers, like the corporates, because with a no-code platform and similar tools like we um, do deliver, you can create stuff much quicker than you could before, and you don't need to work through these endless cycles of functionality criteria and on sort of on the blackboard, because what you can do now with these types of tools is to get a description from the actual people that has the problem, create a solution quickly, not the perfect solution, but as close as you can get, put it in the hands of the users, and then listen to what they're doing, what's missing, what's good, what you need to expand on. And in our experience doing a lot of projects, what we realize is that about half of what could be considered criteria to the application is discovered during the process of playing with the MVP. So when if you think about that more theoretically, it means that you can never be able to criterionize the whole solution up front. So you need to get it out, and I think the whole no code revolution in its many diverse applications will sort of shift the whole discussion about how we think about software for enterprise, and the way they buy software will change. And at least in the European context, corporates have spent 20 years of pushing IT out of the business. I think in the next 15 or 20 years they're gonna put IT back in the business, because the tools give them the ability to control more, and they can rely less on consultants and other external parties. So I think we're in the beginning of a sort of a big change with regards to how we think about enterprise software. And obviously the cloud and cloud services like MongoDB and Google Cloud and AWS are part of that ecosystem. And we're sort of with a group of players that's close to the customers and the end use cases, but it's sort of an ecosystem that's bringing this forward.
Now, you touched on something there. I know we were heading toward wrap up, but you touched on something that's piqued my interest, and I'm wondering if is AppFarm seen as kind of a prototyping tool for applications that would be developed in another environment?
That's a very good question. Like we created AppFarm to not be a prototyping tool alone, but we are not sort of afraid for it to be used in that for that purpose, because what we typically we have a couple of products where we say to corporates that give us your problem and give us a week and we can deliver an MVP. And then they say, yeah, but we might not sort of develop it using your technology. And we say that's completely fine, because we take down the initial cost and your risk to a level where you have spent less money and time delivering the actual blueprint of your application, functioning application. It works now, and if you want to develop that in your own, infrastructure, or you're using your own development people or your own tool, whatever, that's fine with us. But honestly, in most cases, when people see that we can deliver in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the discussion is regarding prototyping or MVP is over, because they just continue using it, right? So it's not a prototyping tool. There are other tools that are meant for that purpose, but given the powerful nature of the application, you can use it for prototyping, just prototyping with real stuff.
Well, we're just about out of time. I want to give you an opportunity to tell the listeners where they can get more information, and maybe talk about any social links or anywhere you'd like to send people for more information.
Sure. So you can visit us at our website, appfarm.io. That's the primary contact point, and we also are available on your social media of choice. But we primarily focus on LinkedIn, where we have a lot of updates coming in different forms. So that's the primary contact points.
Well, Marius and Ole, thank you so much for spending some time with me. I've learned a lot about AppFarm, and I look forward to seeing where you guys go.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.